Imagine for a moment that you could travel through time not just a few thousand years, but hundreds of millions back to a period when planet Earth was so different that you probably wouldn't even recognize it. Long before dinosaurs ruled tropical forests, vast plains, and shallow seas, Earth had already gone through a turbulent and extraordinary journey. In this script, we're going to dive into a real, scientific, and fascinating narrative that will reveal what the planet was like before the famous giant reptiles appeared. Get ready, because this story is worthy of an epic life movie, filled with catastrophes, mass extinctions, and creatures so bizarre they would make any science fiction monster look ordinary. Our timeline goes far beyond what most people know, uncovering forgotten eras that shaped the perfect stage for the arrival of dinosaurs. About 4.5 billion years ago, Earth was born as a blazing sphere of molten rock, formed from the dust and debris orbiting around a young sun. For millions of years, our planet was constantly bombarded by meteors and asteroids, some so large they could have wiped out any potential form of life. But it was within this chaos that water began to accumulate, and the first oceans started to form. These primordial seas held the most important ingredient in history: life. It was there, in simple carbon molecules, that the first signs of microscopic organisms emerged. Bacteria and archaea were the pioneers, invisible to the naked eye, yet absolutely crucial, because without them, nothing we know today would exist. For billions of years, these microorganisms ruled Earth alone. They transformed the planet's chemistry, produced oxygen, and laid the foundations for more complex life forms. Around 600 million years ago, during the Ediacaran period, strange creatures began to appear in the oceans. Picture flat, mat-like organisms on the seafloor, without mouths, eyes, or limbs, spreading in vast colonies. These beings looked nothing like modern animals, and for a long time scientists weren't even sure if they were animals or some type of fungus. Even so, it was the beginning of a silent revolution that set the stage for an unprecedented explosion of diversity. And then came the famous Cambrian explosion, about 541 million years ago. This was one of the most important moments in the history of life. In a relatively short span of geological time, almost all major animal groups we know today suddenly appeared. The seas filled with bizarre creatures, trilobites with rigid exoskeletons crawling along the bottom, giant worms hunting prey, and even the first real predators, like a Anomalocaryza creature, that could grow nearly a meter long, and used its appendages to grab victims. By the standards of the time, it was a terrifying monster. Diversity was so immense that in just a few million years, the planet shifted from quiet seas to a true underwater battlefield. Moving forward, we reached the Ordovician period, about 485 million years ago. Life was still restricted to the oceans, but those seas were full of primitive corals, mollusks, and the first jawless fish, covered in bony plates that served as armor. However, this period ended with one of the first great mass extinctions in history, wiping out about 85% of marine species. This happened due to drastic climate changes. When massive glaciers formed and oceans receded, even in the face of this tragedy, life found ways to reinvent itself. Soon after, during the Silurian and Devonian periods, between 440 and 360 million years ago, something extraordinary began to happen. Life finally conquered dry land. The first plants appeared along damp shores, small and simple, but paving the way for primitive forests. Insects and arachnids began to crawl across the ground, transforming the landscape forever. In the seas, fish were evolving rapidly, with species developing jaws, teeth, and even the earliest fossilized sharks. The Devonian is called the Age of Fish because they dominated the oceans in varied and fascinating forms. And it was also during this time that the first tetrapods appeared, the distant ancestors of all four-limbed animals, including us, humans. But Earth seemed to enjoy testing the limits of life. The end of the Devonian brought yet another mass extinction, erasing many species. Still, life refused to stop advancing. In the Carboniferous period, between 359 and 299 million years ago, the planet transformed into a gigantic tropical jungle. Imagine vast forests of towering thick trees, endless swamps, and a hot, humid climate. It was in this setting that giant insects appeared, like dragonflies with wingspans of up to 70 centimeters, and millipedes the size of crocodiles. The abundance of oxygen in the atmosphere allowed these animals to grow to enormous proportions. In addition, the first reptiles began to appear, adapted to living far from water, a key difference from their amphibian ancestors. The Carboniferous was also responsible for forming the planet's largest coal reserves, as dead plants accumulated and transformed over millions of years into carbon layers. Then came the Permian period, from 299 to 252 million years ago. At this time, Earth's landmasses were united into a supercontinent called Pangaea, and the climate ranged from arid deserts to dense forests. Reptiles began to diversify, giving rise to increasingly sophisticated forms. Strange creatures like Dimetrodon, with its huge sail on its back, roamed the land millions of years before dinosaurs ever existed. But the Permian also held one of the darkest moments in the planet's history, the largest mass extinction of all time, known as the Great Dying. It occurred about 252 million years ago and wiped out approximately 90% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial ones. Massive volcanic eruptions in the region of Siberia released poisonous gases and drastically warmed the planet, making Earth nearly uninhabitable. It was the end of an era, but paradoxically, also the beginning of another. And it was precisely after this devastation that the stage was set for the great protagonists we know, the dinosaurs. But notice something important. By the time they finally appeared, there was already a long history of evolution, adaptation, and extinction that had shaped the planet. Long before dinosaurs, extraordinary creatures, oceans full of monsters, and forests of giant insects had already ruled and disappeared, leaving their marks forever in the history of life. This forgotten past shows us something powerful. Life on Earth has always been resilient. Even after unimaginable catastrophes, it always found a way to go on. Knowing this makes us realize that we are part of an immense and ancient chain that began with invisible microorganisms and led all the way to us. If you found this journey fascinating and were surprised to discover what Earth was like before the dinosaurs, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss any incredible stories about the mysteries of our planet, life, and the universe. After all, the more we understand the past, the better we can understand the present and prepare for the future.